Yeah, hi. I'm Travis Brown with the Bryan College Station Eagle here. I cover Texas A&M athletics, but it's football season coming up, and so a lot of A&M football, a lot of Jimbo Fisher, and a lot of excitement after what they were able to do last year, losing only to Alabama and winning the Orange Bowl.
So you're telling me there's excitement for Texas football?
There's excited for Texas A&M football, yeah, for
Or in the
sure.
state of Texas in general?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there's always excitement for football in Texas. That is for sure.
Okay, now we're talking about Jimbo. Jimbo came with a lot of question marks. Has he answered those already, or is it we're still hoping there's more to come?
I mean, I think that last year was kind of the year that everybody bookmarked that really should have been his breakthrough season with Kellen Mond being the senior, having that senior quarterback that had some years, having some years to bring in some of his own recruiting classes and to kind of develop the system. And they proved that, yeah, that surely was the breakout year. Of course, like we said, only losing to Alabama in a 10-game SEC slate, going on to winning the Orange Bowl and finishing fifth, which is the highest final ranking they've had since before World War II. And so I think that a lot of those questions have been answered per se. I think that the next step is, okay, now that Jimbo has proven that he can replicate some of the success he had at Florida State, can he maintain that and make A&M a continual power, a continual top 10, if not playoff finisher for the years to come? And I think that's kind of that next level that the fan base and that A&M has progressed to under Jimbo Fisher.
Well, you mentioned something very important, that the new coach comes in and he wants to bring in his guys. And we're in that transition. How did he do with the older regime and the old guys? And how is he going to make that flow into his new guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did do a pretty good job. I mean, of course, Kellen Mond was not a quarterback that he recruited. Kind of was a little bit of a different model of a quarterback under Kevin Sumlin. He came in, molded him into the kind of quarterbacks that he has produced in years past, and I think that was a good indication for everyone else that, like, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He has the resume, and he's put it on the field. And with how many 8-5 seasons the Aggies put up
Right.
under Kevin Sumlin, I think that just the record alone stands itself to prove that, hey, this system works. And so these younger guys coming in certainly see the pedigree that Jimbo Fisher has and the kind of athlete that he produces. And I think that there is a lot of buy-in from the young guys and the guys he's recruiting because of what he's been able to demonstrate.
Well, I'm originally from the north end of the country. I'm from Ohio, but I pay attention to what's going on around me. And I remember when Rich Rodriguez came to Michigan, and he said, when I get my guys in here, we're going to be something to worry about. And my thought was, but your guys aren't there now. So you're just writing off this season. You're writing off the next two seasons. What are you going to do? It doesn't seem that Jimbo did that. He embraced the new guy, or the older guys, I should say, Calamond and others, and said, we're going to roll what we have. And then when we get what we bring in, we're going to be even more dangerous. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think a lot of what has made Jimbo Fisher successful in a lot of past places, I know there's a lot of cliche that goes into culture of a program, but I think he does really institute a hard nose, very kind of tough culture that asks a lot of the players, and the players who are able to live up to the amount of kind of blood, sweat, and tears that they require of their players are the ones that not only stick around and thrive, but become better athletes and better players ultimately because of that culture. And so I think there is some extent to seeing that Jimbo Fisher coming in has brought a higher caliber of recruit to Texas A&M a little bit more consistently. But I think that more so than just looking at bringing in his guys, there is to an extent a level of implementing that culture, and that's a lot of what I think helped them be successful early on.
Well, you mentioned Calamond, and those are good points. You mentioned Calamond, and we know football now revolves around that guy, that position, that quarterback guy. He's gone now. And do they have someone in place, or is it going to be kind of that we're going to wait and see, or are they going to spread the wealth around everybody else going into the season?
Yeah, no, Jimbo Fisher is for certain a kind of guy that's going to hone in on his guy and name a starter. He hasn't done that yet. The battle right now is between Haynes King and Zach Calzada. Haynes King is this will be his second year in the program. He got a little bit of action in backup last year, but with the COVID extra years, that everything is kind of all mixed up in that. But he seems to be the front runner. He is the more mobile guy. He's the guy that follows a little bit more of that Kellen Mond. And if you want to be a little bit over hyperbolic, you might say he's a little bit more of the more Johnny Manziel prototype, where he can move around, he can use his legs to create plays, and he has a pretty decent arm. Zach Calzada, on the other hand, while he is athletic and can run the read option, he is a guy who's a little bit more of a traditional pocket passer, and he has the strongest arm. If I had to put my money down today, I think Haynes King is going to be the guy. Even Isaiah Spiller, when we were talking to him on Sunday, kind of said maybe let the beans spill a little bit and said something like there's a lot of continuity on the offense, and with Haynes back there, and something to that extent, saying, and that was the only quarterback that he named. Right. And so it might seem that he might be the front runner in the locker room as well, but you can't count Zach Calzada out either, because he has a very accurate, very strong arm. The reason why I go a little bit more towards Haynes King is the fact that on the offensive line, A&M lost 4 starters, only returned Kenyon Green. And so if you're trying to build a little continuity and build up a new offensive line, the little bit more mobile quarterback that can get out of the pocket and still get things done might be a little bit better option in that situation. Now, the offensive line might gel perfectly and just leave off from the very successful season they had last year, but I still think in that situation, probably I would lean more towards the more mobile quarterback.
Well, when you lose 4 offensive linemen, you have to retool what you do, and you're bringing in a new quarterback, and we're not even sure who that's going to be. Let's say that they're both good options, but still, we haven't made that defining person there. So do we rely more on the run game this year?
Of course. I mean, they have maybe one of the best running backs in the SEC in Isaiah Spiller. He was way up on the charts in yards last year, and actually finished with over 1,000 yards, 1036 yards, is averaging 5.5 yards a game, and scored 9 touchdowns, and was really already one of the premier backs in the SEC. And now he'll come back as a junior with maybe aspirations to going to the NFL early, and will want to put up another season. But behind him, they have depth, because they also have Devon Achane, who ended up being the MVP of the Orange Bowl coming in the second half when Spiller went out injured. He's a 200-meter runner for the Aggie track team, and is doing some great things there, and still ultimately finished the season with 364 yards and averaged 8.5 yards per game last year in playing in 8 games. So really successful. And then they can also mix back in there Anaya Smith, who's kind of their do everything skill player, who probably will see a little bit more action out at wideout, but at times they can bring him back in a 2-back set and really kind of catch defenses on their heels. Smith rushed for 293 yards last year, even though he was moved and probably played more snaps out, split out wide as a wide receiver. So they are set in the running back position, and probably will lean a little bit more. I mean, Jimbo Fisher is a ball possession coach, so he's going to run the ball a lot, but they might lean a little bit heavier on the run game this year than maybe last year with Kellen Mond, depending on which guy they go with and how easily that quarterback can get settled into things in the passing game.
Well, as you're in flux that way, you have, a depth of running back and a flanker, so to speak, there. You're looking at maybe some bubble screens, some jet sweeps, that kind of stuff coming from there.
Yeah. It's interesting. Jimbo Fisher isn't a guy that actually does a lot of the jet sweep. They run it a lot in practice, but they haven't actually run that a lot in games. Probably when you have a guy like Anias, what they do more with is they run a 2-back set out of shotgun, and can run some misdirection from what that guy can do with Anias, but they'll move Anias around. They'll put him all the way outside. They'll move him on the inside. Screen game wasn't super, it's interesting because 2 seasons ago, the screen game was a very vital part of what A&M was doing. Last year, they kind of moved away from it and was more about that mid-range passing game a little bit more than your traditional screens. And then, I don't know, maybe moving back with a quarterback who's more moving into the system, that might be a little bit more of a security blanket type play. We might see more of that. But yeah, Anai Smith, really, really strong out of the two bet set, and even a power I set, which is pretty old school. They'll throw him back in that when you get in the red zone to really kind of confuse some defenses.
Well, and I think a lot of it was with the consistency that Clemons started to show as his career progressed. You're able to throw the ball downfield a little bit more, those intermediate passes as well. So, yeah.
Correct.
Now, we know that people graduate. We also know that sometimes if someone graduates, a stud comes in or a potential all-league player. So we're looking at 4 offensive linemen going. Who's replacing them?
Yeah, I got to pull up my notes because it's been kind of all over the place.
Sure.
I think that I mean, the main guy in the middle that there a lot of people are talking about is Luke Matthews, which is the youngest brother of the Matthews, the whole Matthews group family. And I know Jimbo Fisher joked at one of his speaking engagements this summer that the only thing that he kind of holds over the Matthews family head is that they didn't have another kid, that he could have another kid to be able to coach. So in the last practice that we saw, of course, Kenyon Green is their All-American stud who's returning last year. He played a lot of left guard last year, has moved over to left tackle for most of spring and into the fall. But in the open practice that they held Sunday, he was actually more inclined to be at right guard with Tennessee, with the transfer that they got in from Tennessee, Jameer Johnson, setting up a little bit more at left tackle. Beyond that, as I'm scrambling here, you have Luke Matthews at center, you have Kenyon Green, Jameer Johnson. It's going to be a little bit of a rotation too, at that position. But you have so you have some guys like as I'm sorry, my computer's being slow here. You have guys like Blake Trainer, who is a sophomore, coming in, playing a little bit at right guard. Like I said, you had Luke Matthews, you have Aki Ogunbiyi, which is a mouthful to say. He's a freshman, a true freshman coming in, who Jimbo Fisher has absolutely raved about. So you'll probably see him really involved in things that as well. And then as we said before, Kenyon Green, Smart Chibuzo is a guy who could see some action at center as well. So that's just kind of the thing. But I think the guy to look out for too a lot would be Jameer Johnson, the graduate transfer from Tennessee that could step in and really give a veteran presence to this offensive line that's going to be decently young.
Well, and the nice thing is we have a quote unquote preseason this year. So you will have that ability to get guys to gel a little bit more. That last year was just, hey, we're playing this week, go play. So that'll help out a little bit. Now, we know when we're making the transition from the offensive end, and I know we in our minds are offensive driven. What's the defense look like this year? Because we know Jimbo likes to stop defense.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's already been a lot of allusions to the old late 80s, early 90s wrecking crew teams that were just dominant defenses for Texas A&M in regards to this squad coming back now. I know here in Texas, people will know that the Bible of college and high school football is Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, which is a big deal down here. And the Aggie defensive core was actually, I have the magazine right here. The Aggies defensive quad right here was featured on the front of it with Michael Clemons. DeMarvin Leal is probably the biggest prospect on the defensive line. Damani Richardson at safety, Miles Jones at corner. Miles Jones, a guy who came back from last season. He took that extra COVID year to be able to come back. So as well as Aaron Hansford, a linebacker who had an invitation to the Senior Bowl and decided to not go and come back and play another season this year for the Aggies. Their defense is going to be stout. It's probably going to be the strength of their team this year, led by Leal. They lose their leading tackler Buddy Johnson last year, but guys like Andre White and Edrin Cooper can step right in, and they basically have guys with experience on the entire defensive line. I know a lot of people are even saying A&M's secondary, which their pass defense was actually a lot worse than their run defense last year, but still top 50 in the nation. They might say that their secondary might be the best in the SEC with Jalen Jones, Miles Jones at cornerback, Damani Richardson, and Leon O'Neal at safety. So if they can do what they did last year and run defense and improve that pass defense, I mean, it's going to be an absolute force to be reckoned with in the SEC.
Well, I think their pass defense was affected by the fact that their offense was so consistent and so combustible that teams had to pass the ball more than they ran. Because let's face it, that was a pretty darn good team last year, and their offense was pretty productive. So
that is true.
You know, when it's more balanced, well, maybe it might not be more balanced, but it may be more balanced where teams might think they're in the game and they try and run the ball more this year, and they're not going to do it. Maybe that will improve the pass defense.
Sure, so, and a little bit of it too was the fact that they didn't have a great push on the defensive line and getting pressure on the quarterback last year until later in the season. And one way that Jimbo Fisher, and of course it's football basics, one way that you can help your defensive secondary is to get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. That developed as the season went on, and they were able to do a lot more of that as the season went on as well.
And we're looking at Watch Award winners or people on there as well. Who stands out for you from the defense as far as this guy is going to be a stud and people are going to be looking at him, not just locally, but nationally?
Yeah. I mean, of course, DeMarvin Leal is going to be potentially a first-round draft pick on the defensive line. Just an absolute freak of an athlete. He did. I mean, if there was pressure getting in on quarterbacks last year, a lot of it was coming either from Bobby Brown, who of course was drafted last year, or from Leal moving both inside and outside on the defensive line. He had 37 tackles last year, 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Actually, pulled out an interception too. Had 3 pass breakups, had 8 quarterback hurry. I mean, he's a versatile player that was able to even sometimes drop back into coverage in the flat when they were doing different kinds of blitz schemes and stuff like that. A guy that I'll actually be really interested to see what he's able to do is Michael Clemons, another defensive end on the team who was an outrageously highly regarded prospect coming in his first couple of seasons, but because of injuries has kind of been on and off. And I think this is going to be a season where, I mean, he really will need to prove himself, but I think he can prove himself. He's going to come into it healthy, and he's going to have a chance to really show out. I mean, he had 4 sacks last year, which was only bested by Bobby Brown. And then as well as Tyree Johnson and Buddy Johnson, they returned Tyree Johnson too, who had 4 sacks. So I think those are the guys that are already on everyone's radar, but Michael Clemons is a guy that I really want to see what he's able to do as well.
Okay, and we're looking at, of course, those close games that we're talking about and how that plays out. That always feeds into the special teams. And it's not just the kicker, it's the punter, the long snapper, and the coverage units. And I know a lot of that doesn't really get formed until we get them out there, who the starters, who we're bringing in as reserves that are on the coverage units. But what are we returning and what are we looking at as far as moving the special teams forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, they returned both their kickers. Nick Constantino, the punter, did a really great job. It's tough shoes to fill coming after the guy coming after Braden Mann, who was a Ray Guy Award winner and actually was drafted 2 years ago. But he averaged 40.53 yards per punt, and dropped 13 inside the 20 last year. Great punter, did what he needed to do. Seth Small, 11 for 13 last year on field goals. Of course, had the game-winning field goal against Florida, was ice there. At times, he could struggle with a little bit of inconsistency, especially actually both of his misses were in the 20 to 29 range and the 30 to 39 range. He was actually 2 for 2 from 40 for 49 and 1 for 1 from inside. But that mid-range where you kind of need to be nails is a little bit where he had a little bit of shakiness last year. And Caden Davis is their kickoff specialist, which he has a booming leg. And during fall camp, they actually brought him in, and during spring game, they actually brought him in to kick some of the long field goals, and he hit one over 50 yards. So there could be an opportunity maybe for him to step up and be a longer field goal kicker for them as well. As far as the return game goes, it's all about Anaya Smith, who we talked about a little bit earlier. He is their kick and punt returner, and he has really done well, but he hasn't had maybe one or two of those really explosive moments that you're expecting. And I think it'd be really good for his career and his resume to have a few of those explosive plays this year from the kick game. Always fun though to watch him. Both him and Miles Jones were on the punt return team, and they both wear 0. It's always fun to watch the circus of him running off to put on the number 19 jersey and get it taken off so we could run back out and play offense. So we'll get to see that again this year.
I remember seeing that. It's like, where do you go? Oh, what is it? The same guy? Yeah, it was pretty cool. Now, those 2 misses of the 11 and 13, if I remember right, one of them was at home, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or were both of them at home?
I believe so. I believe they were both at home.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that. And again, maybe because of the COVID and the fans and all that, maybe it doesn't feel like a home and away kind of situation. But I remember seeing at least one of them like, you don't miss that kick at home. So
no, so he missed one. He missed one at Alabama. He was 1 for 2 at Alabama, and he was 1 for 2 at Auburn. Actually, both on the road there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Both on the road. So both in the state of Alabama. Something about the state of Alabama that didn't settle right with Sesmall.
I've been to Alabama a couple times. I can understand that. So no offense, just kidding. Now, this is the coming out or the continuation of Jimbo. Now, does he have his staff in place the way he wants it, or is it still kind of we're picking and choosing and figuring things out? How's the coaching staff look?
Oh yeah, coaching staff is nailed in. Of course, he's kept Mike Elko, which has kind of been the most important thing that he's been able to do. The defensive coordinator, who he pulled in from Notre Dame. I mean, A&M's defenses have just been stout every year since he's been there. And of course, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but in total defense last year, A&M was ranked 9th in the nation. In rushing defense, they were number 2 in the nation. Of course, number 2 in the SEC as well, because they were behind Georgia in both of those. And in passing yards per game allowed, 56 in the nation, 2nd in the SEC. 59th in the nation, 9th in the SEC. No, I'm getting that wrong again. Passing is very tall. Yeah, 56th, 2nd in the SEC in passing defense. And so, that's been the biggest strength of A&M. Of course, Jimbo Fisher, he has Daryl Dickey as offensive coordinator. He does some great things with the offense. Jimbo Fisher, though, is the main offensive play caller, has a real hands-on approach with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. And so that as well. I think the guy you got to highlight on the coaching staff is actually the guy that was even here during Kevin Sumlin. That's the defensive ends coach, Terry Price. Who was an Aggie himself, has stayed around, and is probably one of the best recruiters. And he was one of the guys that was able to get guys like Myles Garrett in here. And he's just really made this defensive line something to be feared across the SEC. Also is a mean barbecue chef, mean guy on the grill. And famous for that. But I think Terry Price is always a guy you got to mention when you're talking about the success of this coaching staff.
Well, you brought up something that I was going to segue to, so you beat me to it. Thank you. That you're looking at Jimbo Fisher coming from outside, if you want to call it the outsider, and we know how stout football is in the state of Texas. So there is a guy who can recruit Texas. How do they go about, or have they figured out making inroads? Because we know that Texas football, the state of Texas football is insane, and there are studs all over the place. Have they made inroads on the big markets yet, or are they still kind of feeling their way through?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the recruitment that A&M has become only exponentially more national since Jimbo Fisher has got here. But they'll always say that they are going to stay grounded in and look first in the greater Houston area, which is just about an hour and a half from College Station here. And there's plenty of talent to go around in that Houston area, and then expand out to the state. And then when they have other needs to fill and they can go outside the state, they can do that. But if you look at the first couple seasons Jimbo Fisher had here, they were pulling in guys from Georgia, from Florida, a lot of those guys that Jimbo Fisher was recruiting while they were at Florida State, and we're definitely kind of honing in there. So it has become a lot more regional. But I mean, if you look at the state of recruiting now, how many of those those top kids from Texas had been going to A&M in Texas? They're going to Alabama, they're going to Ohio State, they're going all over the country. So just recruiting in general has become more national. But Jimbo Fisher and his staff will always say that it all starts in Texas, at home. And this incoming class is very, very Texas centric. The class of 2022, they have almost all from Texas, and the only one so far that's committed is a kicker from Washington. Everyone else is from the state of Texas, and most of them come from that from that Houston metropolitan area. And so that's just really where the kind of foundation comes for recruiting with A&M.
Well, I'm going to ask you one question that I don't know if there's an answer to, so don't struggle with it if you do. With the movement or supposed movement or whatever's going on with the Longhorns, how does that affect, or does it affect what's going on with A&M?
I mean, I think it's going to be hard to tell, but you got to think that, yeah, one of the recruiting pitches that Texas A&M had over Texas, over Oklahoma, over any of the Big 12 schools is, if you're a Texas athlete and you want to play in the SEC, you can come to A&M and your family can come and watch games, and you don't have to travel across the country to be a part of the SEC. Now, Texas and Oklahoma are going to have that same bargaining chip. Now, I think one of the things A&M will have in its favor, at least in the next couple of years to come, is just the longevity in the SEC, and understanding the ins and outs of it, and having that little bit of recruiting momentum already. Not to mention, Texas really hasn't proven itself to be a contender in the Big 12 in the past handful of years. And so it'll be interesting to see if they come over the SEC, and if they don't have that same kind of success, A&M will still have the bargaining chip of, well, we're winning games here and we're in the SEC. Now, if Texas can come in and start winning games like Oklahoma will probably be able to do, that's going to affect stuff. Now, it's interesting because Texas is it's easy to talk about Texas as this one place with those athletes, but it's so big that a program like A&M, like for instance, looking at their 2022 class, can fill up most of their class with 4- and 5-star athletes just from the Houston area.
Right.
And a program like Oklahoma can dip into the DFW Metroplex and find the same kind of well of talent. And there's kind of enough to go around. So it will be interesting to see if you have some of these athletes that in the past did go to Alabama, like the Jalen Waddles, or did go to Ohio State, like the South Lake quarterback Quinn Ewers is announced that he's going to do and forego his season. Instead of that, if they will stay in the state and either go to Texas A&M or Oklahoma right outside the state, and kind of keep that talent a little bit more centralized. But yeah, I think the biggest impact you'll see from Texas joining is everyone hopes, at least I'm not myself an Aggie, but as someone who covers the team, I hope the game comes back, because that's going to be fun and exciting. And two, that those recruiting battles become a little closer to home and a little bit more real and tangible than they did in years past.
Well, and from someone who's from a one-horse state, so to speak, from Ohio, I mean, I know there's OU and Bowling Green and places like that, but it's Ohio State, and then everyone else gets whatever else is there. Give the people an idea of just how intense Texas college football is as far as recruiting and all that. You know, you mentioned Texas A&M, Tech, Houston, SMU. Where do you go to get guys, and how much is it a battle in each place?
Well, I mean, it's always been a battle between Texas and A&M, and I'm gonna forget the kid's name because it's been a while back. But you mean, you have like the little funny instances, like one of the big fan sites down here, TexAgs, doing a whole documentary on a recruit, and that for that recruit only to then commit to Texas, and that documentary gets thrown back in Aggie's faces.
Right.
And then you have a guy like Bryce Anderson this year who was down to Texas and A&M, and he chooses A&M over Texas. And the Twitter, there's videos laughing at each program going back and forth. So I think recruiting, the battles and the fan exchange between recruits has intensified in the last 10 years, because that's really the only battlefield that the two programs competed in when it came to football. And so there was a lot of animosity there, because they were still going after a lot of the same types of commits. And I think that will stay that intense now that they're battling for the same commits to play each other actually on the field.
Well, when we're looking at the outlook of the season, and I know there are so many things they have to factor in coming back from last year, going forward to this year. And again, we're not entirely certain what's going to happen this year, but I think we've got a better handle on it now than we did before. And not gun to your head or anything like that, but what is the outlook? What are we looking at conference-wise? What are we looking at nationally? What are we thinking record-wise, and maybe a ranking and bowl kind of aspirations?
I think the expectation is to do at least what they were able to do last year, and that is take the one loss to Alabama and see where the cards might fall in putting them potentially in the playoff with what that's able to do. I think if they run the table, except for Alabama, which is a lot more feasible this year because they actually have, not, it was a 10-game SEC schedule that they rolled through last year with. Maybe you can say Vanderbilt was a little bit of a patsy in that schedule, but now they have Kent State, Prairie View A&M, Colorado is actually their one big non-conference, but that should be a win. And then I'm blanking on the last one, but another directional school. And so those are going to be a lot easier task, and some weeks that they have to recover and rest. And it's not just that grind of SEC team after SEC team after SEC team like they had last year. So I think it's a little bit more favorable and feasible this year. I think the one thing to watch is Alabama comes to Kyle Field this year. Tickets, secondhand tickets for that are already going at like $400. I mean, it's one of the games of the season, because it really will have implications potentially on what the SEC West ultimately shakes out for, you would think, save for one of those. So really, I think when you look at the season as a whole, I think the thing I'm going to be the most interested in is what that differential in that Alabama game looks like. Have they closed the gap if they lose, or is it still the same 22 touchdown, 20-point losses like they've taken at best in the years past? And then interested a little bit, and like they didn't actually play Ole Miss last year. That was the one game that got canceled from COVID. And with how potent that Lane Kiffin offense is, that could be definitely a trip up game for A&M. So I think that they have the talent. It's a little bit hard to predict because you don't know what the quarterback play is going to look like, but they have security at almost every other position group on the field. And so I think realistically, it isn't out of bounds to say that they should take only one loss, and that's to Alabama this year. But I want to circle that Ole Miss game, because I think that Ole Miss game is one that could definitely be a trip up. And if they finish with 2 losses, it might be because of that. But yeah, and if they only have 1 loss, and that's only to Alabama, and if they can keep it close, well, then you're looking at a team that should probably be in contention for the college football playoff. So you're looking in that top 6 range. If they take that second loss with the strength of the SEC schedule too, I think a top 10 finish with 2 losses would probably be realistic, and something that probably fans would be disappointed about, because I think that for the next 2 to 3 years, that playoff push is going to be strong for the Aggies to try to get in. And if they don't, there's probably going to be some level of disappointment. But as long as you're maintaining 1 to 2 loss seasons with top 10 finishes, that's moving it to that next level. That's that consistency that Jimbo Fisher, that's that next step for him in his tenure here.
And that's where it's helpful to play in the SEC as opposed to playing in the Pac-12.
Exactly.
Now we've covered a lot of things. What is the main thing, or the major thing that has to be addressed or fixed, or however you want to put it? But if this doesn't get taken care of, the season is going to be a struggle.
Offensive line. It's simply going to be the offensive line. I mean, they were you could arguably the second best offensive line in the country last year, as they finished second to the Joe Moore Award to Alabama. And so much of what they were able to do, Kellen Mond for like the first 2 seasons under Jimbo was constantly on his butt because guys were getting through the line, and whether he got the pass off or not, he was taking shots, getting hit, and the ability to sit back and have some comfort in the pocket made all the difference for A&M and for him last year. I think, especially with a young quarterback, you really got to protect him, give him time, let him work through his progressions and run the offense. And with having to fill four holes from guys who graduated or moved on last year, it's going to be a tough task. And this season goes one way or the other, depending on how well the offensive line plays. And then quarterback. I mean, the offensive line can play well, but if you have a quarterback who's constantly turning the ball over, your season's not going to go well. So one of those two things, I really don't see many holes. You do have to replace your leading tackler, and there's one linebacker spot on that side of the ball that you're going to have to fill. But Edrin Cooper looked great in the spring game. Andre White is a guy with a lot of experience. I don't see a lot of holes there. As long as they can get a little bit more pass rush, the defense is going to be fine. It's really starts with the offensive line and then secondarily quarterback. If that's those two positions can shore up, the sky's the limit.
Well, the nice thing about backing up guys who are really good, you could have been very good, just no one saw you. So they may be ready to be primetime players since we haven't seen them yet. So it's not like you're backing up guys on a 2-12 team. So that could be a positive. Now, on the positive side of it, who do we hang our hat on? Who are the players or the unit that you go, no matter what happens, we don't have to worry about them. They're going to be studs.
Running back on the offense for sure, because of the three guys we listed earlier, they're guys who can create yards after contact. So if that offensive line struggles a little bit, they should be able to help the offense out and move the chains when necessary. And they can, with the amount of backs they have that are that talented, they can run some 2-back sets. They can run some 21 personnel, even some 22 personnel to run a lot of misdirection and give the offensive line some effort. And so I think running back will be strong. Tight ends actually something we didn't talk about, and that is another strength because you have Jalen Weidermeier, who returns as a he's going to be on the Mackey Award watch list and was way up there last year. And Baylor Cupp is a guy who was highly touted when he came in as a recruit, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And so they'll have both of those guys this year. And you might definitely see a lot of those guys working in some 2 tight end sets like they've done before to really give Haynes King some short yard security blankets.
Well, it looks like, coming off the season they came off of, and knowing you've got a lot of pieces back, and the pieces that aren't back, it seems like there are people in place for that. So it looks like it's going to be a heck of a season. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why A&M was picked by the media. They're in the top half of the SEC for this year, and I think that this is another season. It's a really interesting one because all of the pieces are there, except for the fact really that they have a few holes in the offensive line, and they're going to be breaking in a new quarterback, and that's a real interesting place to be in because they have every tool to be successful. They just need the guys that touch the ball the most to be at least consistent. And I think, like we've said, the sky's the limit.
Well, Travis, it's been great having you. We're going to follow you and A&M as we go through the season. Give the people an idea of where they can find you, read you, hear you, see you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all the work is on theeagle.com or myaggienation.com. It's the same content on 2 websites. And then on Twitter at Travis_L_Brown.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.